The moment didn't begin with an announcement, a press release, or even a caption. It began quietly, almost too quietly for something that would soon dominate timelines and fan conversations everywhere. Yu and Tian Xuning walked into the venue separately, yet somehow together, their timing so perfectly aligned that it felt intentional without ever being declared. No hands held, no words exchanged in front of cameras, just presence. And somehow, that was enough to stop everything. Fans noticed it instantly. Yu arrived first, composed and calm, dressed with understated confidence. There was no rush in his steps, no attempt to play to the cameras. He greeted staff politely, nodded to familiar faces, and took his place as if this was just another night. But then, moments later, Tian Xuning appeared. Her entrance wasn't loud or dramatic either. No wave, no forced smile, just a steady walk forward, eyes focused, posture relaxed. And in that brief overlap, when the cameras caught both of them within the same frame, the atmosphere shifted. There was no direct interaction, no whisper, no glance that could be easily dissected. Yet the tension between them was undeniable. It wasn't the kind of tension born from rumor or scandal, but something quieter, something practiced, familiar. The kind that comes from two people who don't need to prove anything because the history already exists. Inside the venue, their seating arrangement became the next focal point. Not side by side, but not far apart either. Close enough to be aware of each other. Close enough that every subtle movement felt amplified. Yu leaned back during speeches, calm and observant. Tian Xuning listened intently, her reactions measured. At one point, she laughed softly at a comment from the stage, and almost instinctively, Yu smiled too, just a fraction of a second later. It was small, almost invisible, but fans caught it. Social media erupted not because of what they did, but because of what they didn't do. No forced interactions, no denial, no confirmation. Just two people existing in the same space with a comfort that couldn't be staged. Clips slowed down, screenshots zoomed in. Timelines filled with the same question asked in 100 different ways. How can something so quiet feel so loud? Industry insiders began weighing in, noting how rare it is for stars to command attention without saying a single word. In an era of constant updates and oversharing, Yu and Tian Xuning did the opposite. They let the silence speak. And the silence was powerful. By the end of the night, they exited separately again. No dramatic farewell. No lingering pause. Yet the impact lingered long after the lights dimmed. Fans weren't talking about outfits or speeches anymore. They were talking about energy, about timing, about how some connections don't need labels to be felt. No announcement was made. No truth was confirmed. But in that shared spotlight, Yu and Tian Xuning reminded everyone of something simple and rare, that sometimes presence alone is enough to tell a story. The conversation didn't fade after the venue emptied. If anything, it grew louder once Yu and Tian Xuning disappeared from view. Fans replayed the footage again and again, not searching for dramatic proof, but for meaning hidden in the smallest details. A pause in Yu's step as he passed a familiar corner. The way Tian Xuning adjusted her posture when he spoke nearby. None of it was definitive, yet all of it felt intentional. By morning, fan forums were filled with long threads analyzing the timeline of the night. Some pointed out that their arrivals were staggered just enough to avoid direct comparison, yet close enough to link them together in memory. Others noticed how neither of them posted on social media afterward. No selfies, no behind-the-scenes shots. In an industry where silence often speaks louder than words, that absence felt deliberate. Industry watchers began to suggest that this wasn't a coincidence but a carefully respected boundary. Not a publicity stunt, not a reveal, just a shared understanding. Yu has always been known for guarding his private life fiercely, choosing his moments carefully. Tian Xuning, equally selective, has built a reputation on quiet strength rather than loud headlines. Together, even without standing side by side, they formed a kind of unspoken alliance. What intrigued fans most was how comfortable they seemed not performing. When cameras turned away, there was no sudden shift in behavior, no visible relief or tension. They didn't rush toward each other, but they didn't avoid shared spaces either. That balance between distance and familiarity felt practiced, like two people who already know where the lines are drawn. Rumors began circulating almost immediately. Some claimed they had been in contact for months, quietly supporting each other through separate projects. Others believed this appearance marked a turning point, a moment where they no longer felt the need to hide, but also no need to explain. Still, neither side offered confirmation, and perhaps that was the point. A few days later, an interview clip resurfaced from years earlier, where Ziyu once said that the strongest connections don't need to be proven publicly. Fans connected the dots, wondering if this moment was a reflection of that belief. Tian Xuning, in a separate past interview, had spoken about valuing peace over noise, choosing depth over display. Together, those words suddenly felt prophetic. What made this moment resonate wasn't romance alone, it was maturity. In a world obsessed with declarations and labels, Yu and Tian Xuning showed restraint. They allowed the audience to feel something without telling them what to feel. And in doing so, they reclaimed control over their narrative. The spotlight moved on, as it always does, but the impression remained. No announcement followed. No denial came. Just a lingering sense that something real had passed through that room, quietly, briefly, and on their own terms. And for many fans, that was more powerful than any confirmation could ever be. Days passed, but the atmosphere around Ziyu and Tian Xuning didn't settle. It deepened. The buzz shifted from excitement to quiet certainty, the kind that doesn't rely on proof. Fan edits slowed down, becoming softer, more reflective. Instead of dramatic music and bold captions, people began pairing their clips with calm instrumentals, letting pauses and glances speak for themselves. Then came the schedules. Industry insiders noticed something subtle but impossible to ignore. Their public appearances never overlapped directly, yet they followed a rhythm. When Ziyu was seen leaving a studio late at night, Tian Xuning posted a single, uncaptioned photo of the moon an hour later. When Tian Xuning wrapped a shoot in another city, Ziyu shared a line from a poem about distance and patience. No names, no tags, just timing. Fans didn't call it coincidence anymore. What stood out most was how both of them seemed lighter. Ziyu's recent interviews carried a new calm, his answers shorter but warmer. Tian Xuning, known for measured responses, smiled more easily, as if the weight of expectation no longer pressed so hard. Neither addressed rumors, yet neither tried to outrun them. Behind the scenes, staff began to talk, not in leaks, but in tone. A stylist casually mentioned how Ziyu had requested simpler looks lately, something that feels honest. A makeup artist working with Tian Xuning noted that she no longer asked for heavy touch-ups, preferring to look like herself. These weren't announcements, but they felt like alignment. One night, a short clip surfaced, blurry, taken from far away. Two familiar silhouettes walked into the same private building from different entrances, minutes apart. No faces, no confirmation, just enough to reignite the conversation. But unlike before, fans didn't demand answers. Many simply said, "Let them have this." And that was the shift. The narrative was no longer about exposure or proof. It became about respect. About two people choosing privacy in an industry that profits from revelation. Ziyu and Tian Xuning weren't hiding. They were protecting something before it could be misunderstood. As weeks turned into a month, the spotlight softened. New headlines emerged. New couples trended. Yet their story lingered, untouched by scandal or denial. It lived in quiet consistency, in the way they moved, spoke, and chose silence together. Perhaps one day they would speak openly, or perhaps they never would. But what they had already shown was enough. Sometimes the strongest statement isn't made on a stage or in front of microphones. Sometimes it's made by simply walking forward, side by side, even when the world can't see it. The quiet continued, and in that quiet, something rare began to happen. People listened. Ziyu's next public appearance was small, almost deliberately so. No grand entrance, no dramatic styling. He greeted staff by name, bowed a little longer than usual, and when asked about upcoming plans, he smiled and said only that he was taking things step by step. It wasn't evasive. It felt grounded. Fans noticed how his eyes lingered just a second longer when someone mentioned support systems, how his voice softened without him realizing it. Not long after, Tian Xuning appeared at a cultural event, standing beneath soft lights instead of flashing cameras. She spoke about growth, about learning when to protect your heart and when to let it breathe. It wasn't framed as romance, but everyone understood the subtext. The applause that followed wasn't loud, it was warm. Online, the conversation changed again. Instead of asking, "Are they together?" fans began asking, "Are they happy?" And the answers, though unspoken, seemed to lean gently toward yes. What made their story resonate wasn't mystery anymore. It was restraint. In an era of instant confirmations and strategic reveals, Yu and Tian Xuning chose slowness. They chose to let meaning exist without explanation. Every small choice, the timing of posts, the careful distance from headlines, the absence of denial, felt intentional. There was a moment that sealed it for many. A charity event released a behind-the-scenes photo hours after it ended. In the background, barely in frame, Yu could be seen holding a coat. Moments later, fans realized the coat matched the one Tian Xuning wore when she left the venue. No hands entwined. No shared spotlight. Just care, captured by accident. No one demanded a statement after that. Instead, messages flooded in, words of support, patience, and understanding. Fans thanked them for showing a different kind of connection, one built on quiet presence rather than performance. Even skeptics softened, admitting that whatever this was, it felt real in a way publicity never does. And so the story continued, not as a headline but as a slow unfolding. Yu and Tian Xuning kept moving forward, separately and together, choosing moments over noise, truth over timing. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with an announcement. Sometimes it simply stays, steady, unseen, and strong enough to be felt without ever being named.